Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that during the hiring assessment for a critical project management role at Cognizant Technology Solutions, the assessment team primarily focused on the candidate's technical project management certifications and past project successes, while giving minimal consideration to their references' feedback regarding collaboration and adherence to company policies. Which approach to risk assessment in this hiring scenario is most aligned with best professional practice? Option A. An assessment that focuses exclusively on the candidate's ability to meet project deadlines, as this is the primary metric for project management success. Option B. An assessment that prioritizes technical certifications and past project achievements, assuming that strong technical skills inherently mitigate other potential risks. Option C. An assessment that relies heavily on the hiring manager's intuition and personal rapport with the candidate to gauge their suitability. Option D. A comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates technical proficiency, behavioral competencies, reference feedback, and potential alignment with Cognizant's ethical guidelines and security protocols. Correct answer is D. A comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates technical proficiency, behavioral competencies, reference feedback, and potential alignment with Cognizant's ethical guidelines and security protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment methodologies within the context of a hiring process, specifically for a role at Cognizant Technology Solutions. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough due diligence with the practicalities of recruitment timelines and the ethical imperative to avoid bias. A robust risk assessment in hiring should identify potential risks associated with a candidate's suitability, not just their technical skills, but also their alignment with company values and their potential impact on team dynamics and organizational security. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates potential risks across multiple dimensions. It involves a comprehensive review of the candidate's background, qualifications, and behavioral indicators, cross-referenced against established risk profiles relevant to the role and the technology sector. This approach aligns with ethical hiring principles by aiming for objectivity and fairness, and it implicitly supports regulatory compliance by seeking to identify and mitigate risks that could lead to non-compliance or reputational damage. It prioritizes a holistic view of candidate suitability, moving beyond a superficial assessment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical skills fails to acknowledge the broader spectrum of risks inherent in hiring. This could lead to overlooking critical issues such as a candidate's integrity, their propensity for unethical behavior, or their potential to introduce security vulnerabilities, all of which are significant risks to an organization. Ethically, this approach is flawed as it neglects the responsibility to ensure a safe and productive work environment for all employees and to protect company assets. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the specific role and industry, overlooking non-technical risks could inadvertently lead to non-compliance with data protection, intellectual property, or anti-fraud regulations. Another incorrect approach that relies heavily on subjective impressions or gut feelings is professionally unacceptable due to its inherent bias and lack of objectivity. This method is prone to unconscious biases, leading to discriminatory hiring practices, which is a direct violation of ethical standards and employment laws. It lacks any systematic basis for risk identification and mitigation, making it unreliable and potentially damaging to the organization. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should define the types of risks to be assessed, e.g., technical, behavioral, security, ethical, establish clear criteria for evaluating these risks, and outline mitigation strategies. It should also incorporate mechanisms for objective evaluation, such as standardized interview questions, reference checks, and background verification, to ensure fairness and compliance. Professionals should be trained to identify and mitigate their own biases, and to rely on evidence-based assessments rather than subjective judgments. Question 2. Upon reviewing the initial findings of a potential security vulnerability within a new software deployment, what is the most appropriate next step in the risk assessment process for Cognizant Technology Solutions? Option A. Conduct a thorough analysis to determine the likelihood of the vulnerability being exploited and the potential impact on business operations and data. Option B. Initiate a full system rollback of the new software deployment without further investigation. Option C. Rely on the IT security team's initial assessment that the vulnerability is minor and unlikely to cause significant issues. Option D. Immediately escalate the issue to the highest levels of management for a decision on whether to proceed with the deployment. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the issue to the highest levels of management for a decision on whether to proceed with the deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment methodologies within the specific regulatory context of the Cognizant Technology Solutions hiring assessment test. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate approach when faced with incomplete or potentially misleading information, necessitating a judgment call that aligns with established best practices and regulatory expectations for risk management. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of potential risks. This involves not just identifying threats, but also understanding their likelihood and potential impact, and then developing mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management frameworks, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory bodies to ensure operational resilience and compliance. A proactive and thorough risk assessment is crucial for informed decision-making and for safeguarding the organization's assets and reputation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, obvious threats without considering their probability or potential impact is professionally unacceptable. This failure represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse because it can lead to misallocation of resources, overlooking critical vulnerabilities, and ultimately failing to meet compliance obligations. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a superficial understanding of risk management principles. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition rather than structured analysis is also professionally flawed. This approach lacks objectivity and can be influenced by bias, leading to inaccurate risk assessments and potentially exposing the organization to unforeseen dangers. Ethically, it fails to uphold the professional standard of evidence-based decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the risk assessment. This involves identifying the specific assets, processes, or systems to be evaluated. Next, a systematic process of risk identification should be undertaken, utilizing a variety of methods to uncover potential threats. Following identification, each risk should be analyzed for its likelihood of occurrence and its potential impact. This analysis should be as objective as possible, drawing on data and expert judgment. Based on this analysis, risks should be prioritized, and appropriate mitigation strategies should be developed and implemented. Finally, a continuous monitoring and review process is essential to ensure the effectiveness of the risk management program and to adapt to evolving threats. Question 3. Quality control measures reveal that the risk assessment process for a new client engagement at Cognizant Technology Solutions has been conducted with varying levels of detail and without a consistent framework for evaluating the severity of identified risks. Some risks were flagged based on informal discussions, while others were documented with limited analysis of their potential impact on client operations or Cognizant service delivery. The team is eager to finalize the assessment to proceed with project onboarding. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for risk assessment in this scenario? Option A. Expedite the finalization of the risk assessment by relying on the existing informal notes and the team's collective experience to categorize risks, focusing only on those that appear to be the most immediate and severe threats. Option B. Prioritize documenting only the most critical risks that have a high probability of occurring and a significant impact, while deferring the documentation of lower priority risks to a later stage once the project is fully operational. Option C. Focus on gathering more anecdotal evidence from team members about potential issues, assuming that a comprehensive list of potential problems will naturally emerge through ongoing project execution. Option D. Implement a standardized risk assessment methodology that includes defined criteria for risk identification, analysis, likelihood and impact, and scoring. Ensure all identified risks are documented with supporting evidence and proposed mitigation strategies, and establish a process for regular review and update of the risk register. The correct answer is D. Implement a standardized risk assessment methodology that includes defined criteria for risk identification, analysis, likelihood, and impact, and scoring. Ensure all identified risks are documented with supporting evidence and proposed mitigation strategies, and establish a process for regular review and update of the risk register. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk identification with the imperative to adhere to regulatory requirements and ethical standards. The pressure to deliver findings quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the thoroughness and accuracy of the risk assessment, potentially exposing Cognizant to significant operational and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment process is both effective and compliant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented methodology for risk assessment, aligning with established industry standards and the implied regulatory framework for IT service providers. This approach ensures that all identified risks are properly categorized, analyzed for impact and likelihood, and that mitigation strategies are developed and tracked. This adherence to a structured process is crucial for demonstrating due diligence, enabling effective risk management, and satisfying potential audit requirements. It fosters transparency and accountability within the risk assessment process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach fails to establish clear criteria for risk severity, leading to subjective and inconsistent evaluation. This lack of objective measurement makes it difficult to prioritize risks effectively and can result in critical threats being overlooked or minor issues being overemphasized, violating principles of sound risk management and potentially failing to meet regulatory expectations for a robust risk framework. Another incorrect approach relies solely on anecdotal evidence and past incidents without a forward-looking analysis of potential new threats or vulnerabilities. This reactive stance is insufficient for a comprehensive risk assessment, as it neglects emerging risks and fails to proactively implement preventative controls, which is a fundamental expectation in regulatory guidance for risk management. A third incorrect approach involves bypassing the documentation of identified risks and mitigation plans. This omission creates a significant compliance and operational risk. Without documented evidence, it is impossible to demonstrate adherence to risk management policies, to track the effectiveness of controls, or to provide assurance to stakeholders or regulators. This lack of documentation is a direct failure in establishing a transparent and auditable risk management system. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the specific regulatory and organizational context. This involves identifying all applicable laws, industry standards, and internal policies. The next step is to define a clear methodology, including how risks will be identified, analyzed, likelihood and impact, evaluated and treated. Documentation at every stage is paramount. When faced with time pressures, professionals should advocate for adequate resources and time to complete the assessment thoroughly, rather than compromising on quality. If time constraints are unavoidable, prioritization should be based on a predefined risk matrix and impact assessment, focusing on high-priority risks first, but ensuring that all identified risks are at least acknowledged and logged. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment are also critical components of a mature risk management program. Question 4. Market research demonstrates that a new AI-powered analytics platform can significantly enhance client portfolio performance insights for Cognizant technology solutions. However, the platform requires access to anonymized historical client financial data for training. The implementation team is eager to deploy the platform quickly to gain a competitive edge. Which of the following approaches best balances the benefits of the new technology with the imperative to protect client data and comply with regulatory frameworks? Option A. Proceed with immediate deployment of the platform, ensuring only anonymized data is used for training, and conduct a comprehensive security audit post-implementation. Option B. Utilize the platform with live, non-anonymized client data for initial testing to identify potential issues before implementing anonymization. Option C. Implement the platform in phases, starting with a pilot group, ensuring robust data anonymization techniques are applied before data enters the system, and conducting thorough security and privacy impact assessments throughout the process. Option D. Deploy the platform immediately with a basic security check, planning to address any data privacy concerns that emerge during its operational phase. The correct answer is A. Proceed with immediate deployment of the platform, ensuring only anonymized data is used for training, and conduct a comprehensive security audit post-implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a new technology, while promising efficiency gains, introduces potential risks related to data privacy and security. The challenge lies in balancing innovation with the imperative to protect sensitive client information, a core responsibility in the financial services sector. The pressure to adopt new technologies quickly can sometimes overshadow thorough risk assessment and compliance checks, creating a conflict between business objectives and regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation with robust data anonymization and security protocols. This aligns with the principles of data protection by design and by default, as mandated by relevant financial regulations. By anonymizing data before it enters the new system and conducting thorough security audits, the firm demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding client confidentiality and adhering to data privacy laws. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of breaches and ensures compliance with regulatory requirements for data handling and security. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new system without any data anonymization or security review poses a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes data protection laws that require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure the security of personal data. It also violates ethical obligations to clients to protect their sensitive information. Deploying the system with only a basic, superficial security check, without addressing the specific risks associated with anonymizing data for the new technology, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to meet the standard of due diligence required by regulators. It suggests a lack of understanding of the specific vulnerabilities introduced by the technology and a failure to implement proportionate security measures, potentially leading to data breaches and regulatory penalties. Adopting a wait-and-see approach, where the firm plans to address data privacy issues only if they arise, is a dereliction of professional duty. This reactive stance is contrary to regulatory expectations that emphasize proactive risk management and compliance. It exposes the firm and its clients to unnecessary risks and demonstrates a disregard for established data protection principles and legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to technology implementation. This involves identifying potential risks early, assessing their impact, and developing mitigation strategies that are aligned with regulatory requirements and ethical standards. A structured process of due diligence, including thorough security assessments, privacy impact assessments, and phased rollouts with continuous monitoring, is crucial for responsible innovation. When faced with such dilemmas, professionals should prioritize client protection and regulatory compliance, even if it means a slower implementation timeline. Escalating concerns to relevant compliance and legal departments is also a critical step when uncertainties arise. Question 5. Performance analysis shows that a key team member consistently meets their project delivery deadlines and key performance indicators, KPI, related to task completion. However, client feedback indicates a pattern of poor communication, a lack of proactive engagement, and a perceived unresponsiveness to queries, despite the technical accuracy of their work. How should this situation be addressed to ensure both individual development and sustained client satisfaction? Option A. Immediately issue a formal warning to the employee for failing to meet client expectations, citing the negative feedback as grounds for disciplinary action. Option B. Focus solely on the quantitative metrics, as the employee is meeting their defined targets, and disregard the qualitative client feedback as subjective and less critical. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive performance review that integrates quantitative metrics with qualitative client feedback, followed by a structured development plan focused on communication and client engagement skills. Option D. Advise the employee to improve their communication independently without providing specific guidance or support, as it is considered a personal skill. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive performance review that integrates quantitative metrics with qualitative client feedback, followed by a structured development plan focused on communication and client engagement skills. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge where a team member's performance, while meeting some quantitative targets, exhibits qualitative shortcomings that could impact client relationships and long-term business sustainability. The difficulty lies in balancing immediate performance metrics with the broader, more subjective aspects of professional conduct and client service, which are crucial for a company like Cognizant Technology Solutions operating in a regulated environment. A purely quantitative approach risks overlooking critical issues that could lead to client dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and potential regulatory scrutiny if service delivery falls below expected standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a holistic performance evaluation that integrates both quantitative data and qualitative feedback. This aligns with best practices in performance management, emphasizing that success is not solely defined by numbers, but also by the quality of execution, client interaction, and adherence to professional standards. For a company like Cognizant, which operates under various service level agreements, SLAs, and client expectations, this comprehensive view is essential. It ensures that employees are not only productive, but also contributing positively to client relationships and the company's reputation, which indirectly supports compliance with contractual obligations and industry best practices. This approach fosters a culture of continuous improvement and addresses potential risks before they escalate. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the quantitative metrics, ignoring the qualitative feedback. This fails to acknowledge that client satisfaction and long-term engagement are vital for business success and can be directly impacted by poor communication or lack of proactivity, even if targets are met. Ethically, this approach can lead to a disengaged workforce and a perception that the company does not value client centricity or employee development beyond raw output. It also risks overlooking potential breaches of service quality that could have contractual or even regulatory implications if service levels are not maintained. Another incorrect approach involves immediately escalating the issue for disciplinary action without attempting to understand the root cause or provide constructive feedback. This is procedurally unsound and ethically questionable, as it bypasses the opportunity for coaching and development. It can create a climate of fear and demotivation, hindering open communication and problem solving. From a professional practice standpoint, it demonstrates a lack of leadership and an inability to manage performance effectively through support and guidance. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the qualitative feedback as subjective and therefore less important than the quantitative data. This is a failure to recognize the interconnectedness of performance. In a service-oriented industry, client perception and relationship management are critical components of service delivery. Ignoring these aspects can lead to a decline in client retention and business opportunities, which ultimately impacts the company's financial health and its ability to meet its obligations. This approach also fails to uphold the professional responsibility to deliver high-quality client-focused services. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a balanced approach to performance evaluation. This involves 1. Gathering comprehensive data. Collect both quantitative performance metrics and qualitative feedback from various sources, including clients, peers, and supervisors. 2. Contextualizing performance. Understand the factors influencing performance, both positive and negative. 3. Providing constructive feedback. Deliver feedback that is specific, actionable, and balanced, addressing both strengths and areas for improvement. 4. Developing improvement plans. Collaborate with the employee to create a plan for development, offering support and resources. 5. Regular follow-up. Monitor progress and provide ongoing coaching and support. This structured approach ensures fairness, promotes development, and mitigates risks, aligning with professional ethics and best practices in talent management. Question 6. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical project component is nearing its integration deadline, and the assigned developer has completed the coding and initial unit testing. However, the mandatory peer code review process, a cornerstone of Cognizant's quality assurance framework, has been significantly delayed due to other team members' commitments. The developer is under pressure to integrate the component to avoid project slippage. Considering the internal guidelines and best practices for software development at Cognizant, which of the following actions best upholds professional responsibility and quality standards? Option A. Escalate the delay in the peer review process to the project manager, highlighting the potential impact on the deadline and requesting guidance on prioritizing the review or exploring alternative solutions. Option B. Integrate the component immediately to meet the deadline, assuming the unit tests are sufficient and the risk of undetected issues is minimal. Option C. Proceed with integrating the component without the formal peer review, documenting the deviation and the reasons for it, and scheduling an expedited review post-integration. Option D. Inform the project manager that the integration cannot proceed until the peer review is completed, even if it means missing the stated deadline. Correct answer is C. Proceed with integrating the component without the formal peer review, documenting the deviation and the reasons for it, and scheduling an expedited review post-integration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient project delivery with the imperative to adhere to Cognizant's internal quality assurance protocols and potentially relevant industry best practices, even if not explicitly mandated by law for this specific type of assessment. The pressure to meet deadlines can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, which can lead to compromised quality, increased risk of errors, and a failure to demonstrate a commitment to robust development and testing methodologies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes thoroughness and adherence to established quality gates. By conducting a comprehensive review of the code and documentation against the defined requirements and best practices, the individual demonstrates a commitment to delivering a high-quality, reliable product. This aligns with professional ethics that emphasize competence, diligence, and the avoidance of harm to the end user or the organization due to substandard work. It also reflects a proactive stance in identifying and mitigating potential issues before they escalate, which is a hallmark of responsible professional conduct. An incorrect approach that bypasses the peer review process and submits code directly for integration would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would violate the principle of due diligence and potentially breach internal quality assurance policies designed to catch errors and ensure code integrity. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of accountability and a disregard for the collaborative nature of software development, potentially exposing the project and Cognizant to significant risks, including reputational damage and financial loss due to defects. Another incorrect approach, such as performing a superficial review without thoroughly checking against requirements or best practices, would also be professionally deficient. This would be a failure of competence and diligence, as it would not effectively serve the purpose of the review. It could lead to the acceptance of flawed code, undermining the quality assurance process and potentially introducing bugs into the system. This approach demonstrates a lack of commitment to professional standards and a superficial engagement with the task. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of project requirements, internal quality assurance procedures, and ethical obligations. When faced with time pressures, professionals should first assess the impact of any proposed shortcuts on quality and risk. If a deviation from standard procedure is considered, it should be formally documented, justified, and approved by appropriate stakeholders, rather than being unilaterally implemented. Prioritizing adherence to established best practices and quality gates, even when inconvenient, is crucial for maintaining professional integrity and ensuring the successful and reliable delivery of services. Question 7. Analysis of how a hiring manager at Cognizant Technology Solutions should approach the evaluation of candidates for a critical project role, given a tight project deadline and the need to maintain the highest standards of assessment integrity. Option A. Focus primarily on the candidate's previous work experience and educational background, giving less weight to the performance demonstrated during the actual assessment exercises. Option B. Prioritize completing the evaluations quickly to meet the project deadline, focusing on the most obvious strengths and weaknesses of each candidate without extensive documentation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive and objective evaluation of each candidate's performance against the established assessment criteria, ensuring thorough documentation of findings and justifications for each rating. Option D. Allow personal impressions and anecdotal evidence gathered during informal interactions to significantly influence the final assessment scores, even if they contradict formal test results. The correct answer is B. Prioritize completing the evaluations quickly to meet the project deadline, focusing on the most obvious strengths and weaknesses of each candidate without extensive documentation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between delivering a project efficiently and ensuring the integrity of the testing process. The pressure to meet deadlines, a common occurrence in the IT consulting industry, can tempt individuals to cut corners. However, Maintaining the credibility of the assessment is paramount, as it directly impacts the hiring decisions and the future capabilities of Cognizant technology solutions. The correct approach, which involves a thorough and unbiased evaluation of each candidate's performance against predefined criteria, represents best professional practice. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness and objectivity. In the context of a hiring assessment, this means strictly adhering to the established rubric, ensuring all candidates are assessed on the same basis, and documenting the evaluation process meticulously. This practice upholds the integrity of the assessment, prevents potential discrimination, and ensures that only the most qualified candidates are selected, thereby safeguarding Cognizant's reputation and operational effectiveness. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, such as rushing through evaluations or making subjective judgments without sufficient evidence, would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the selection of underqualified candidates or the rejection of suitable ones, resulting in potential project delays, increased training costs, and damage to team morale. Ethically, this approach violates principles of fairness and impartiality. Another incorrect approach, such as allowing personal biases or external pressures to influence the evaluation, is a direct contravention of ethical conduct and professional responsibility. This can lead to discriminatory hiring practices, which are not only unethical but also potentially illegal, and undermine the trust placed in the assessment process. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the assessment objectives, a commitment to objective evaluation, and a willingness to seek clarification or escalate concerns if faced with undue pressure. Professionals should always prioritize adherence to established protocols and ethical guidelines over expediency. When faced with conflicting priorities, it is crucial to document the situation, communicate concerns transparently, and seek guidance from supervisors or relevant stakeholders to ensure decisions are made in a manner that upholds professional standards and organizational integrity. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that Cognizant Technology Solutions is considering a strategic acquisition. The internal team is divided on the primary evaluation criterion. One faction advocates for prioritizing the target company's recent surge in market valuation and positive media coverage as the main indicator of success. Another group believes the most critical factor is the target's established long-term client contracts and recurring revenue streams. A third perspective emphasizes the potential for rapid integration and immediate synergy realization as the paramount consideration. A fourth viewpoint suggests a comprehensive assessment of the target's technological innovation pipeline and its alignment with Cognizant's future product roadmap, which approach best aligns with best practices for evaluating strategic acquisitions. Option A. Prioritizing the target company's recent surge in market valuation and positive media coverage as the main indicator of success. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the target company's established long-term client contracts and recurring revenue streams. Option C. A comprehensive assessment of the target's technological innovation pipeline and its alignment with Cognizant's future product roadmap. Option D. Prioritizing speed of integration and immediate synergy realization above all else. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive assessment of the target's technological innovation pipeline and its alignment with Cognizant's future product roadmap. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for rapid decision-making in a dynamic market and the imperative to adhere to established best practices for evaluating potential investments. The pressure to act quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass crucial due diligence, potentially exposing Cognizant Technology Solutions to significant financial and reputational risks. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with thoroughness. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based evaluation of potential acquisition. This aligns with the principles of sound financial management and corporate governance, which mandate that investment decisions be supported by comprehensive analysis. By focusing on strategic fit, financial viability, and integration feasibility, the chosen approach ensures that any acquisition is not only financially sound, but also strategically aligned with Cognizant's long-term objectives. This methodical process minimizes the likelihood of overpaying, encountering unforeseen integration challenges, or acquiring an asset that does not contribute to the company's growth and competitive advantage. It reflects a commitment to responsible stewardship of company resources and adherence to industry best practices for mergers and acquisitions. An incorrect approach that solely relies on the perceived market momentum of the target company fails to conduct adequate due diligence. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it neglects the fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of shareholders and the company. Such an approach risks making an investment based on speculation rather than concrete analysis, potentially leading to significant financial losses if the market momentum is not sustainable or if the underlying business is fundamentally flawed. Another incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on the target company's existing client base, without assessing the quality or longevity of those relationships, represents a significant oversight. This is ethically problematic as it prioritizes a superficial metric over a deeper understanding of the business's true value and sustainability. It can lead to an overestimation of the acquisition's worth and a failure to identify potential risks associated with client churn or dissatisfaction. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of execution above all else, even at the expense of a thorough review of the target's financial statements and operational capabilities, is a critical regulatory and ethical lapse. This demonstrates a disregard for the fundamental principles of risk management and financial prudence. It exposes Cognizant to potential hidden liabilities, operational inefficiencies, or a lack of synergy, all of which can severely impact the success of the acquisition and the company's overall financial health. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to evaluating potential opportunities. This includes defining clear investment criteria, establishing a robust due diligence framework, assembling a cross-functional team with relevant expertise, and maintaining an objective perspective throughout the evaluation process. Professionals should be empowered to raise concerns and advocate for thoroughness, even under pressure to act quickly. The ultimate decision should be based on a comprehensive understanding of the risks and rewards, supported by verifiable data and sound analytical reasoning. Question 9. The performance metrics show a concerning trend of increased customer complaints regarding potential data privacy breaches. Cognizant's internal audit team has flagged several instances where client data may have been inadvertently exposed due to a combination of human error and outdated security protocols. Which of the following actions best represents a professional and compliant response to this situation? Option A. Temporarily suspend all data processing activities involving sensitive client information until a complete overhaul of the IT infrastructure can be completed. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive, multi-departmental investigation to identify the root causes of the breaches, review and update all relevant data handling policies and security measures, and implement targeted corrective actions. Option C. Issue a public statement acknowledging the possibility of minor data exposure and assuring clients that the company is reviewing its procedures without detailing specific incidents or corrective steps. Option D. Immediately implement a company-wide mandatory retraining program on data privacy and security best practices, focusing on reinforcing existing policies and procedures. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement a company-wide mandatory retraining program on data privacy and security best practices, focusing on reinforcing existing policies and procedures. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in customer complaints related to data privacy breaches within Cognizant Technology Solutions. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts client trust, regulatory compliance, and the company's reputation. The pressure to address these issues quickly while maintaining operational efficiency requires careful judgment and adherence to established best practices. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, root cause analysis of the data privacy breaches. This includes a thorough review of existing data handling protocols, security measures, and employee training programs. It necessitates engaging relevant stakeholders, such as the IT security team, legal counsel, and client relationship managers, to identify systemic weaknesses. Implementing corrective actions based on this analysis, such as enhanced data encryption, stricter access controls, and mandatory, updated privacy training, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy regulation, which mandate proactive measures to safeguard sensitive information and respond effectively to incidents. Ethically, It demonstrates a commitment to client confidentiality and responsible data stewardship. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the complaints as isolated incidents without proper investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for systemic issues and neglects the regulatory obligation to investigate and report data breaches. Another incorrect approach is to implement superficial fixes, like a blanket policy change, without understanding the underlying cause. This is ineffective and may not address the actual vulnerabilities, leading to recurring breaches and further regulatory scrutiny. Focusing solely on blaming individual employees without examining the adequacy of training and oversight is also professionally unsound. It ignores the organizational responsibility to provide a secure environment and adequate resources for data protection, potentially violating ethical duties of fairness and due process. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk assessment, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. This involves gathering all relevant information, consulting with subject matter experts, evaluating potential solutions against established best practices and legal requirements, and documenting the entire process. Transparency and accountability are key throughout. Question 10. Research into best practices for software deployment under tight deadlines reveals a common challenge: balancing the urgency of client delivery with the imperative of ensuring software quality. Cognizant Technology Solutions is nearing the end of a critical project, and the client is pushing for immediate deployment to meet a market window. The testing team has identified several potential performance bottlenecks that, while not critical failures, could impact user experience under peak load. The project manager is considering several options to expedite the release. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and ethical considerations for Cognizant Technology Solutions in this scenario? Option A. Deploy the software immediately without further performance testing, assuming the identified bottlenecks are minor and unlikely to cause significant issues, and address any problems that arise after deployment. Option B. Focus only on functional testing and skip the performance testing phases entirely to meet the deadline, with the understanding that performance issues can be addressed in future iterations. Option C. Proceed with the deployment as scheduled, documenting the identified performance bottlenecks for post-release patching, and communicating the risk of potential user experience degradation to the client. Option D. Delay the deployment until all identified performance bottlenecks are fully resolved and rigorously tested, even if it means missing the client's initial deadline, and clearly communicate the revised timeline and the reasons for the delay to the client. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the deployment as scheduled, documenting the identified performance bottlenecks for post-release patching, and communicating the risk of potential user experience degradation to the client. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between delivering a project within a tight deadline and ensuring the integrity of the testing process. The pressure to meet client expectations and avoid penalties can tempt individuals to cut corners, which directly contravenes best practices in software development and testing. Careful judgment is required to balance business needs with quality assurance and ethical obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and systematic testing methodology, even under pressure. This aligns with industry standards for quality assurance, which emphasize comprehensive test coverage, defect identification, and resolution before deployment. Adhering to a structured testing process, including regression testing and performance testing, ensures that the software is robust, reliable, and meets functional and non-functional requirements. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of post-deployment issues, reputational damage, and potential financial losses for both Cognizant and its client. It demonstrates a commitment to delivering high-quality software, fostering client trust, and upholding professional integrity. An incorrect approach that involves skipping critical testing phases, such as performance testing, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to validate the software's behavior under expected load conditions directly violates best practices for ensuring system stability and scalability. It exposes the client to significant risks of system crashes, slow response times, and a poor user experience, which can lead to client dissatisfaction and potential contract breaches. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on developer testing without independent quality assurance oversight, compromises objectivity and thoroughness. Developers may inadvertently overlook defects or have a bias towards their own code. This lack of independent verification is a significant ethical and professional failing, as it undermines the credibility of the testing process and the quality of the delivered product. A third incorrect approach, which involves deploying the software with known critical defects to meet a deadline, is a severe ethical and professional lapse. This knowingly introduces risk to the client's operations and end users, demonstrating a disregard for quality and a prioritization of short-term gains over long-term client success and professional responsibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly understanding project requirements and constraints, including deadlines and quality expectations. When faced with potential conflicts, the next step is to assess the risks associated with different approaches. This involves evaluating the potential impact of skipping tests or deploying with known issues on system performance, user experience, client reputation, and potential financial liabilities. Open and transparent communication with stakeholders, including the client, is crucial. This involves clearly articulating the risks of compromising testing standards and proposing alternative solutions, such as phased rollouts or adjusted timelines, if necessary. Prioritizing quality and ethical conduct over expediency, even when under pressure, is paramount. This involves advocating for sufficient time and resources for thorough testing and resisting pressure to deploy substandard products. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that a new feature developed for a key client's platform is ready for deployment. However, the development team has identified a few minor, non-critical bugs during internal testing, and there are concerns about potential user adoption challenges. The client is eager for the feature to be released as soon as possible to gain a competitive advantage. What is the most professionally responsible approach to deploying this new feature? Option A. Delay the release indefinitely until every single minor bug is resolved to ensure a completely flawless user experience. Option B. Deploy the feature to all users and then immediately begin planning for the next iteration without actively soliciting or analyzing user feedback from this initial release. Option C. Release the feature to all users immediately, assuming the minor bugs will not significantly impact the user experience or business operations. Option D. Proceed with a phased rollout, starting with a limited group of users to gather feedback and address any critical issues before a full release. The correct answer is D. Proceed with a phased rollout, starting with a limited group of users to gather feedback and address any critical issues before a full release. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in technology projects, balancing the need for rapid deployment with robust quality assurance and adherence to established development lifecycles. The pressure to deliver a new feature quickly, driven by market demands or competitive pressures, can lead to shortcuts that compromise system integrity, security, or user experience. The challenge lies in navigating these competing priorities while ensuring that the implemented solution meets both functional and non-functional requirements, as well as any relevant internal policies or external regulations that might apply to Cognizant's operations or its client systems. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased rollout with comprehensive testing and user feedback integration. This aligns with best practices in software development and project management, emphasizing risk mitigation and iterative improvement. By deploying to a limited user group first, potential issues can be identified and resolved in a controlled environment before a wider release. This approach demonstrates a commitment to quality, user satisfaction, and responsible deployment, minimizing the risk of widespread disruption or negative impact on the client's business. It also allows for agile adjustments based on real-world usage, ensuring the final product is robust and meets user needs effectively. This aligns with general principles of good governance and risk management within IT projects, even without specific regulatory mandates for this particular scenario. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves a full, immediate release without prior pilot testing. This is professionally unacceptable because it significantly increases the risk of introducing critical bugs, security vulnerabilities, or performance issues into the production environment. Such a failure could lead to significant business disruption for the client, reputational damage for Cognizant, and potential financial liabilities. It demonstrates a disregard for established quality assurance processes and a failure to manage project risks effectively. Another incorrect approach is to delay the release indefinitely due to minor, non-critical bugs identified during initial testing. While thoroughness is important, an inability to prioritize and make pragmatic decisions about bug fixes can lead to missed market opportunities and client dissatisfaction. This approach shows a lack of effective project management and decision-making, failing to balance perfection with practical delivery timelines. It can also indicate an over-reliance on a zero-defect mentality that is often unrealistic in complex software development. A third incorrect approach is to bypass the user feedback loop entirely after the initial release, assuming the feature is complete. This is professionally unsound, as it neglects the crucial aspect of user acceptance and validation in a live environment. Real-world usage often uncovers unforeseen issues or usability challenges that are not apparent during internal testing. Failing to gather and act on this feedback means the product may not truly meet user needs, leading to dissatisfaction and potential rework. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to software deployment. This involves identifying potential risks, assessing their impact and likelihood, and implementing mitigation strategies. In this context, a phased rollout with pilot testing is a proven risk mitigation strategy. Decision-making should be guided by a balance of speed to market, quality, and client satisfaction. When faced with pressure to deliver quickly, professionals must advocate for processes that ensure quality and stability, rather than succumbing to shortcuts that could jeopardize the project's success or the client's operations. This involves clear communication with stakeholders about risks and the rationale behind recommended deployment strategies. Question 12. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape when considering the adoption of new technologies. Cognizant Technology Solutions is evaluating a new AI-powered platform for client data analysis. While the platform promises significant efficiency gains, its data processing mechanisms are novel and not explicitly addressed by current internal compliance guidelines. What is the most prudent approach to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the implementation of the AI platform, assuming that existing general data privacy policies are sufficient to cover the new technology's operations. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of the AI platform's data handling against all applicable regulatory frameworks, seeking expert legal and compliance counsel to identify potential risks and implement necessary safeguards before deployment. Option C. Rely exclusively on the vendor's compliance certifications and documentation for assurance that the AI platform meets all regulatory requirements. Option D. Delay the formal compliance review until after the AI platform has been fully integrated into operations, addressing any identified issues reactively. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of the AI platform's data handling against all applicable regulatory frameworks, seeking expert legal and compliance counsel to identify potential risks and implement necessary safeguards before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance where a new technology, while offering potential business benefits, introduces novel risks that may not be explicitly covered by existing regulations. The challenge lies in balancing innovation with the imperative to adhere to the spirit and letter of the law, ensuring that client data and company operations remain secure and compliant. The pressure to adopt new technologies quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking potential compliance gaps, making thorough due diligence critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive assessment of the new technology's impact on regulatory compliance. This includes identifying all relevant regulations, e.g., data privacy laws, cybersecurity standards, financial regulations if applicable to the data processed, evaluating how the technology might interact with or potentially violate these regulations, and implementing appropriate controls or seeking clarification from regulatory bodies if ambiguity exists. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and robust risk management, ensuring that the company operates within legal boundaries and protects its stakeholders. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design, where regulatory considerations are integrated from the outset of technology adoption. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the technology's implementation without a thorough compliance review, assuming that existing general data protection policies are sufficient. This is a failure to conduct adequate due diligence and could lead to breaches of specific regulatory requirements, resulting in fines, reputational damage, and loss of client trust. It demonstrates a disregard for the nuanced requirements of data privacy and security regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the vendor's assurances of compliance without independent verification. While vendors may provide compliance statements, the ultimate responsibility for adhering to regulations rests with the company implementing the technology. This approach outsources critical compliance responsibilities and can lead to unforeseen regulatory violations if the vendor's claims are inaccurate or incomplete. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the compliance assessment until after the technology is fully implemented, hoping to address any issues retroactively. This is a reactive and high-risk strategy. It increases the likelihood of significant compliance failures and the associated penalties, as remediation after implementation is often more complex and costly than proactive planning. It also signals a lack of commitment to regulatory adherence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to technology adoption, prioritizing a thorough understanding of regulatory obligations before committing to new systems. This involves establishing clear internal processes for technology review that include dedicated compliance and legal input. When faced with novel technologies, professionals should err on the side of caution, seeking expert advice and engaging with regulatory bodies if necessary to ensure full compliance. The decision-making process should prioritize long-term integrity and risk mitigation over short-term gains or expediency. Question 13. Which approach would be most professionally sound for Cognizant technology solutions when faced with a client demanding an accelerated delivery timeline for a critical software implementation, potentially compromising standard quality assurance procedures? Option A. Prioritize a phased rollout with comprehensive user acceptance testing, UAT, at each stage, even if it requires renegotiating the final delivery date slightly to ensure thorough validation. Option B. Focus solely on meeting the original deadline by skipping non-critical testing phases and relying on the development team's internal checks to ensure functionality. Option C. Deliver a minimum viable product that meets the absolute basic requirements by the deadline, with no defined plan for subsequent enhancements or bug fixes. Option D. Implement the core functionalities rapidly and defer extensive testing and user feedback until after the initial go-live, with a commitment to address issues as they arise. The correct answer is A. Prioritize a phased rollout with comprehensive user acceptance testing, UAT, at each stage, even if it requires renegotiating the final delivery date slightly to ensure thorough validation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between delivering a project within a tight deadline and ensuring the integrity of the implementation process. The pressure to meet client expectations and avoid penalties for delays can tempt teams to cut corners. However, adhering to established implementation methodologies and best practices is crucial for long-term success, client satisfaction, and maintaining the firm's reputation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, iterative, and quality-assured implementation. This aligns with standard project management principles and the implicit regulatory expectation of delivering reliable and functional solutions. By conducting thorough testing, including user acceptance testing, UAT, and ensuring proper documentation, the firm demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to quality. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of post-implementation issues, reduces the likelihood of costly rework, and builds client trust. It also reflects an ethical obligation to provide a service that meets agreed-upon standards and functions as intended. An incorrect approach that bypasses critical testing phases, such as UAT, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of delivering a fit-for-purpose solution and exposes the client to potential operational disruptions and financial losses. This haste also undermines the firm's credibility and could lead to contractual disputes. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding with a minimum viable product without a clear plan for subsequent enhancements and bug fixes, is also professionally unacceptable. While agile methodologies embrace iterative development, this must be done within a framework that ensures core functionality is robust and that there is a defined roadmap for addressing identified gaps. Failing to do so can lead to a product that is unstable, difficult to maintain, and ultimately fails to meet the client's underlying business needs, thus breaching professional obligations. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear assessment of risks versus rewards. Professionals must advocate for methodologies that ensure quality and client satisfaction, even when faced with time pressures. This involves open communication with stakeholders about potential risks associated with accelerated timelines, and proposing alternative solutions that balance speed with quality. A robust decision-making framework would include 1. Identifying all critical implementation steps. 2. Assessing the impact of skipping or abbreviating any step. 3. Consulting project management best practices and internal quality assurance guidelines. And 4. Seeking consensus from the project team and client on the chosen approach, ensuring all parties understand the implications. Question 14. The review process indicates that a critical phase of a new financial services platform implementation is significantly behind schedule due to unexpected integration complexities with legacy systems. The project team is under pressure to meet the original go-live date to comply with upcoming regulatory reporting deadlines. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Instruct the development team to accelerate their efforts by working extended hours and weekends, without a formal reassessment of the project plan or potential impacts on quality and compliance. Option B. Halt the implementation indefinitely until all legacy system integration issues are fully resolved, without providing a revised timeline or communication plan to stakeholders. Option C. Proceed with the implementation as planned, instructing the team to bypass certain non-critical integration steps and reduce the scope of user acceptance testing to meet the original deadline. Option D. Immediately escalate the delay to senior management and regulatory bodies, proposing a revised, realistic timeline that prioritizes critical compliance functionalities and outlines mitigation strategies for remaining risks. Correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the delay to senior management and regulatory bodies, proposing a revised, realistic timeline that prioritizes critical compliance functionalities and outlines mitigation strategies for remaining risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT project management, where a critical implementation phase is falling behind schedule due to unforeseen technical complexities. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to meet project deadlines with the imperative to deliver a robust and secure system that complies with all relevant regulations. Rushing the implementation without proper testing or validation could lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and non-compliance, resulting in severe financial penalties and reputational damage. Conversely, a prolonged delay without clear communication and a revised plan could erode stakeholder confidence and impact business operations. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the delays and to formulate a realistic and compliant recovery plan. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a transparent and proactive engagement with stakeholders, including a thorough reevaluation of the project timeline and scope. This includes identifying the root causes of the delays, assessing the impact on regulatory compliance, e.g., data privacy laws, security standards, and developing a revised, achievable plan. This plan should prioritize critical functionalities and compliance requirements, potentially involving phased rollouts or the allocation of additional resources. Communicating these findings and the revised plan openly and honestly to all stakeholders demonstrates accountability and fosters trust. This approach aligns with professional ethics of transparency and due diligence, and regulatory requirements for responsible system development and deployment. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the implementation as originally planned, despite the identified issues. This demonstrates a failure to adapt to changing circumstances and a disregard for potential compliance risks. It violates the ethical principle of professional responsibility to ensure systems are fit for purpose and compliant. This could lead to regulatory breaches if the rushed implementation results in security flaws or non-compliance with data protection mandates. Another incorrect approach is to significantly cut corners on testing and quality assurance to meet the original deadline. This is a direct contravention of best practices in software development and IT security. It creates a high risk of deploying a system with critical vulnerabilities, which could lead to data breaches and significant regulatory penalties under data protection laws. Ethically, It represents a failure to uphold professional standards of care and diligence. A third incorrect approach is to indefinitely postpone the launch without a clear plan or communication. While seemingly cautious, this can be detrimental to business operations and stakeholder confidence. It fails to address the underlying issues and can lead to missed business opportunities. From a regulatory perspective, prolonged delays in deploying compliance systems can also have implications, especially if there are mandated timelines for certain functionalities or data handling practices. It demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and strategic planning. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving approach. First, thoroughly investigate the root cause of the implementation challenges. Second, assess the impact of these challenges on project timelines, budget, and, crucially, regulatory compliance. Third, develop a revised plan that prioritizes critical functionalities and compliance requirements, considering options like phased implementation or resource augmentation. Fourth, communicate transparently and proactively with all stakeholders, presenting the revised plan and managing expectations. This iterative process of assessment, planning, and communication ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and compliant with relevant frameworks. Question 15. The analysis reveals that a junior data analyst, while reviewing system logs for a client project, has uncovered unusual access patterns that could indicate unauthorized access to sensitive client personal data. The analyst is unsure if this constitutes a confirmed breach, but suspects it might. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the analyst to take within Cognizant Technology Solutions, considering potential regulatory implications? Option A. Immediately escalate the findings through Cognizant's designated incident reporting channel to the relevant internal security and compliance teams for investigation. Option B. Directly notify the affected client about the potential unauthorized access to their data. Option C. Wait for a senior team member to review the logs before taking any action. Option D. Conduct a more extensive, independent investigation to gather definitive proof of a breach before reporting anything internally. The correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the findings through Cognizant's designated incident reporting channel to the relevant internal security and compliance teams for investigation. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a junior analyst at Cognizant Technology Solutions has identified a potential data privacy breach impacting client information. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of reporting a suspected incident with the need for thorough initial verification to avoid unnecessary alarm and resource misallocation. This requires a nuanced understanding of internal reporting protocols and external regulatory obligations, particularly concerning data protection. The correct approach emphasizes immediate, yet controlled, internal escalation. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing the protection of client data and adhering to regulatory mandates for breach notification. Prompt internal reporting allows for a swift, coordinated response, including investigation, containment, and potential notification to affected parties and regulatory bodies, as required by data protection laws. This proactive stance minimizes potential harm and demonstrates a commitment to compliance and client trust. An incorrect approach would be to delay reporting pending absolute certainty of a breach. This failure to act promptly on a credible suspicion can lead to significant regulatory penalties for noncompliance with breach notification timelines. It also risks further data compromise and erodes client confidence. Another incorrect approach is to bypass internal reporting channels and directly contact regulatory authorities or the affected clients without proper internal authorization or investigation. This undermines established incident response procedures, can lead to premature or inaccurate disclosures, and may violate internal policies and contractual obligations with clients. It also bypasses the organization's opportunity to manage the situation holistically. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that involves 1. Recognizing potential risks and regulatory implications. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures for incident reporting. 3. Exercising sound judgment to determine the threshold for escalation based on the credibility of the suspicion. 4. Communicating clearly and concisely through designated channels. 5. Documenting all actions taken. Question 16. Market research demonstrates that a significant portion of businesses are operating with legacy IT systems that are increasingly vulnerable to cyber threats and may not meet current data protection standards. Cognizant is engaged by a client whose current system is several years old, has known security weaknesses, and is nearing the end of its support lifecycle. The client is concerned about potential data breaches and the associated regulatory penalties, but is also budget conscious and hesitant about a large, immediate capital expenditure. What is the most professionally responsible approach for Cognizant to recommend? Option A. Propose a phased migration strategy that prioritizes addressing critical security vulnerabilities and data protection gaps in the existing system, while simultaneously planning for a comprehensive upgrade to a modern, compliant platform. Option B. Recommend an immediate, full replacement of the entire system with the latest technology, regardless of the client's budget constraints or the potential for operational disruption. Option C. Advise the client to wait until a specific regulatory deadline is approaching before initiating any significant system changes to minimize immediate disruption and cost. Option D. Focus solely on implementing immediate patches and workarounds for the known security weaknesses without addressing the system's obsolescence or future compliance requirements. The correct answer is A. Propose a phased migration strategy that prioritizes addressing critical security vulnerabilities and data protection gaps in the existing system, while simultaneously planning for a comprehensive upgrade to a modern, compliant platform. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in technology consulting where a client's existing, but outdated, system poses a significant risk of data breaches and non-compliance with evolving data protection regulations. The urgency stems from the potential for severe financial penalties and reputational damage. The challenge lies in balancing the client's immediate cost, concerns with the imperative of regulatory adherence and robust security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased migration strategy that addresses critical vulnerabilities first, followed by a comprehensive upgrade. This aligns with best practices for risk management and regulatory compliance. By focusing on immediate security enhancements and data protection measures, it mitigates the most pressing risks while allowing for a structured, less disruptive, and more cost-effective long-term solution. This approach demonstrates a commitment to client security and adherence to data protection principles, which are often enshrined in regulatory frameworks requiring organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying any significant action until a specific regulatory deadline is imminent. This is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive stance towards compliance and security. It significantly increases the risk of non-compliance and potential penalties, as well as exposing the client to ongoing data breach risks. This approach fails to uphold the duty of care to the client and disregards the principle of continuous improvement in security and data protection. Another incorrect approach is to implement a complete, rip and replace system immediately without considering the client's budget or operational disruption. While this might seem like a swift solution, it often leads to significant unforeseen costs, resistance from users, and potential operational downtime. It fails to consider the practical implementation challenges and the client's business continuity, which are crucial aspects of professional consulting. This approach can also be seen as disregarding the client's financial constraints and potentially leading to a solution that is not sustainable for them. A third incorrect approach is to only address the immediate data breach concerns without considering the underlying system's obsolescence and future compliance needs. This is a superficial fix that does not provide a long-term solution. It leaves the client vulnerable to future regulatory changes and evolving threats, demonstrating a lack of foresight and a failure to provide comprehensive strategic advice. This approach neglects the broader responsibility to ensure the client's systems are future-proofed and compliant with a wider range of data protection obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, identifying the most critical vulnerabilities and compliance gaps first. This involves thorough assessment, clear communication with the client about risks and potential solutions, and developing a phased implementation plan that balances security, compliance, cost, and operational impact. Prioritizing proactive measures over reactive ones is essential for maintaining client trust and ensuring long-term success. Question 17. Quality control measures reveal that a client who has consistently engaged in low-risk investment activities has suddenly requested a series of large, complex international wire transfers to an unfamiliar jurisdiction with a high-risk profile. The client insists these transfers are for a personal investment opportunity and is resistant to providing detailed explanations beyond the initial vague description. Employee handling the request is unsure how to proceed, given the significant deviation from the client's established transaction history and the inherent risks associated with the destination country. Option A. Execute the wire transfers as requested, making a brief note in the client's file about the unusual nature of the transactions. Option B. Proceed with the wire transfers, but only after obtaining a signed waiver from the client acknowledging the risks involved. Option C. Inform the client that their request cannot be fulfilled due to the unusual nature of the transactions and the associated risks. Option D. Escalate the matter to the firm's compliance department for further review and guidance before proceeding with any transaction. The correct answer is D. Escalate the matter to the firm's compliance department for further review and guidance before proceeding with any transaction. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between a client's stated preferences and the regulatory requirements designed to protect them. The challenge lies in balancing client autonomy with the firm's fiduciary duty and adherence to regulatory frameworks. A failure to navigate this correctly could lead to regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and harm to the client. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing regulatory compliance and the client's best interests over immediate client satisfaction when those interests conflict. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of Know Your Customer (KIC) and anti-money laundering (AML) regulations, which mandate thorough due diligence and risk assessment. By escalating the situation and seeking clarification from compliance, the professional is adhering to established procedures for handling suspicious activity or transactions that deviate from expected patterns, thereby safeguarding both the client and the firm from potential illicit financial flows. This upholds the ethical obligation to act with integrity and diligence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the transaction without further investigation. This fails to meet the regulatory requirements for due diligence and risk assessment under KYC/AML frameworks. It could facilitate money laundering or other financial crimes, leading to severe penalties for the firm and the individual. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care owed to the client and the integrity of the financial system. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request as unusual and simply refuse to proceed without any attempt to understand the underlying reasons or escalate the matter. Caution is warranted. A complete refusal without internal consultation or further inquiry can be seen as a failure to adequately assess the situation and potentially alienate a client unnecessarily, without fulfilling the firm's obligation to investigate potential red flags. It bypasses the established compliance protocols for handling complex or unusual client requests. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the transaction while making a superficial note of the discrepancy. This is a failure to conduct a meaningful risk assessment. The note is insufficient to demonstrate that the firm has taken appropriate steps to understand and mitigate any potential risks associated with the transaction, thus failing to meet regulatory expectations for robust compliance procedures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach. When a situation presents a deviation from the norm or raises potential red flags, the immediate professional response should be to pause, assess the nature of the deviation against established policies and regulatory requirements, and escalate to the appropriate internal function, e.g., compliance, legal, for guidance. This ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of regulatory obligations and potential risks, fostering a culture of compliance and ethical conduct. Question 18. During the evaluation of a critical project deliverable for a key client, a Cognizant technology solutions consultant discovers a minor but potentially impactful technical flaw. The client has expressed extreme urgency and has emphasized their reliance on the project's timely completion for a major business event. The consultant is aware that reporting this flaw will likely cause significant delays and client dissatisfaction, while a slight modification to the current code, though not ideal, could mask the issue for immediate deployment, with a fix planned for a later, less critical phase. Option A. Downplay the significance of the technical flaw to the client, assuring them it is a minor oversight that will not affect the immediate functionality, and proceed with the current deployment. Option B. Proceed with the immediate deployment, making the minor modification to mask the flaw, and plan to address it in a subsequent update, without informing the client of the initial issue. Option C. Immediately inform the client and project stakeholders about the technical flaw, its potential impact, and propose a revised timeline for a robust solution, while also outlining a plan for a temporary workaround if absolutely necessary and agreed upon. Option D. Escalate the issue internally to management and seek guidance on how to present the information to the client, without directly communicating the flaw to the client, until internal consensus is reached. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the client and project stakeholders about the technical flaw, its potential impact, and propose a revised timeline for a robust solution, while also outlining a plan for a temporary workaround if absolutely necessary and agreed upon. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to please a client and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and company policy. The pressure to deliver a positive outcome for a significant client can cloud judgment, leading to a temptation to overlook or downplay potential issues. Careful consideration of the long-term implications for both the client and Cognizant technology solutions is paramount. The correct approach involves transparent communication and a commitment to finding a resolution that aligns with ethical standards and contractual obligations. This demonstrates integrity, builds trust, and upholds the reputation of the company. It prioritizes accurate reporting and proactive problem-solving over short-term client satisfaction achieved through misrepresentation. An incorrect approach that involves withholding information or downplaying the severity of the identified issue would be a direct violation of ethical codes of conduct, which mandate honesty and transparency in professional dealings. Such an action could lead to reputational damage for Cognizant, potential legal repercussions, and a breach of trust with the client. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating data or creating a misleading report, constitutes professional misconduct and fraud, carrying severe consequences for the individual and the organization. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical conflict. This involves consulting relevant company policies, professional codes of conduct, and any applicable regulatory guidelines. Next, they should gather all relevant facts objectively. Then, they should consider the potential consequences of each possible course of action for all stakeholders. Finally, they should choose the option that best upholds ethical principles, professional integrity, and the long-term interests of the organization and its clients. Question 19. The assessment process reveals that a candidate, who has otherwise performed exceptionally well in initial screening stages, is experiencing a severe personal emergency that is impacting their ability to focus on the upcoming aptitude test. The candidate has requested a slight modification to the testing conditions, specifically asking for a brief, pre-approved extension to the allotted time and a quiet, private space to complete the assessment. Citing the emergency as the reason for their request, what is the most appropriate course of action for the hiring manager to take? Option A. Advise the candidate to withdraw their application for now and reapply at a later date when their personal circumstances are more stable, as the assessment cannot be altered. Option B. Inform the candidate that the assessment must be completed under the standard conditions as outlined for all applicants to ensure fairness and objectivity, and explain that no modifications can be made to the assessment process. Option C. Share the specific questions and format of the upcoming assessment with the candidate to allow them to prepare adequately given their current situation. Option D. Grant the candidate an extended period to complete the assessment and provide a private room, as the candidate's personal circumstances are understandable and the company should show compassion. The correct answer is B. Inform the candidate that the assessment must be completed under the standard conditions as outlined for all applicants to ensure fairness and objectivity, and explain that no modifications can be made to the assessment process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a candidate's personal circumstances and the integrity of the hiring assessment process. The core ethical dilemma lies in balancing empathy for the candidate's situation with the obligation to maintain a fair and objective evaluation for all applicants. The assessment process is designed to measure specific competencies and suitability for the role, and any deviation from the established procedures, even with good intentions, can compromise the validity of the results and create an unfair advantage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it upholds the principles of fairness, objectivity, and integrity in the hiring process. By adhering to the established assessment guidelines and ensuring all candidates are evaluated under the same conditions, the company demonstrates its commitment to a merit-based selection. This approach prevents potential bias and ensures that the hiring decision is based on genuine qualifications and performance, aligning with the ethical standards expected in recruitment and human resources. It also protects the company from potential legal challenges related to discriminatory hiring practices. An incorrect approach that involves providing the candidate with advance notice of specific questions or allowing them to retake the assessment under modified conditions would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This would constitute a breach of confidentiality and fairness, potentially violating internal company policies and general principles of equal opportunity employment. Such actions could lead to accusations of favorability, undermining the credibility of the assessment and the hiring process. Furthermore, it could create a precedent for future leniency, making it difficult to maintain consistent standards. Another incorrect approach, such as dismissing the candidate's request outright without any consideration or explanation, could be perceived as lacking empathy and professionalism. While maintaining fairness is paramount, a complete disregard for a candidate's extenuating circumstances might lead to negative perceptions of the company's culture and could be seen as a missed opportunity to demonstrate a supportive, albeit firm, stance. This could also lead to the loss of a potentially valuable candidate who might have been able to perform well under appropriate accommodations, if such were permissible and feasible within the assessment framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and ethical guidelines. This involves first understanding the assessment's purpose and the rules governing its administration. When faced with a candidate's request for accommodation or special consideration, the professional should consult internal policies and relevant regulatory guidance to determine if any exceptions or alternative procedures are permissible. If the request falls outside of approved accommodations, the professional should clearly and respectfully communicate the assessment's requirements and the reasons for not being able to deviate from them, while still maintaining a professional and courteous demeanor. The focus should always be on ensuring a fair and equitable process for all candidates. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that, while some processes have improved, a significant bottleneck identified in a key operational area has actually worsened, impacting overall productivity more than initially projected. The team leader is under pressure to present a report highlighting the positive aspects of the study to senior management to justify the project's continuation. Option A. Focus the report solely on the areas of improvement and omit any mention of the worsening bottleneck, suggesting the study was largely successful. Option B. Present the complete findings of the efficiency study, including the worsening bottleneck, and recommend strategies to address it. Option C. Reanalyze the data for the bottleneck in a way that minimizes its negative impact, perhaps by excluding certain data points, to present a more favorable overall picture. Option D. Suggest that the data regarding the bottleneck is likely an anomaly and should be disregarded in the current report, with further investigation to be conducted later. Correct answer is B. Present the complete findings of the efficiency study, including the worsening bottleneck, and recommend strategies to address it. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between achieving organizational goals, efficiency improvements, and upholding ethical principles, data integrity, and honest reporting. The pressure to demonstrate positive results can tempt individuals to misrepresent findings, creating a dilemma that requires careful judgment. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, accuracy, and professional integrity. By presenting the full, unvarnished results of the efficiency study, even if they are not as favorable as anticipated, the professional adheres to the ethical obligation to report truthfully. This builds trust with stakeholders and allows for informed decision-making based on accurate data. In the context of a hiring assessment, this demonstrates an understanding of the importance of ethical conduct in business operations, which is a core expectation for any employee. An incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting only the positive findings, while omitting or downplaying negative ones, constitutes a failure of professional integrity and potentially a breach of ethical guidelines related to honest reporting. This misleads stakeholders and can lead to flawed strategic decisions. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating data to create a more favorable outcome, is a severe ethical violation and could have legal ramifications, representing a complete disregard for professional standards and trust. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the negative findings and proceed as if they don't exist, is also a failure of professional responsibility. It demonstrates a lack of accountability and an unwillingness to address challenges, which can lead to long-term organizational problems. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical principles at play, such as honesty, integrity, and accountability. They should then consider the potential consequences of each possible action, both for themselves and for the organization. Seeking guidance from supervisors or ethics committees, if available, is also a crucial step when faced with complex ethical dilemmas. Ultimately, the decision should align with established professional codes of conduct and regulatory expectations for truthful and transparent reporting.